So good afternoon. And we'll carry on with the 37 practices of bodhisattvas. We're up to verse 15, which says, though someone may deride and speak bad words about you in a public gathering, looking on her as a spiritual teacher, bow to her with respect. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So this verse is somewhat similar to the last one, because it's touching on our concern for what people say about us and think about us. And several of the eight worldly dharmas, eight worldly concerns, are related to this. One is about reputation, wanting a good reputation, wanting to avoid a bad reputation or no reputation. So the previous verse, 14, was about that. So that's about what people are saying about us outside and behind our backs and so on. And then another pair of the eight worldly concerns is about what people say directly to our face. So this one is about that. People saying bad words, bad things to our face. And this is really painful in a public gathering. This isn't just private, but lots of people around. And I can't remember whether I mentioned this before, but a couple of years ago, I met a psychiatrist. We were talking about this very issue, about concern of what other people say about us. And he said that in, I guess it's evolutionary psychology. It's a branch of psychology that traces our emotions to things that enabled our early ancestors to survive. So this one was important at that time because to be able to survive, you needed to be part of a group. If you were thrown out of your group, abandoned, rejected, you didn't have much chance of survival. Okay, so it was important to be accepted by, liked by a group. So the theory is, we are hardwired, to have this concern. I don't know if this is true or not, but it's an interesting idea. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama seems to accept it. He does sometimes talk about this, that our emotions have a biological and evolutionary basis. And also because of this issue of loneliness, which has come up in some of the BBC talks, and how devastating that is, that so many people suffer from loneliness and the lack of connectedness with other people, and this has been found to be really bad for our health and our long life and so on. So it does seem, even conventionally, it is important for us to be connected with others, have good relations with others, be accepted by others, and so forth. And also as monastics and teachers, I think it's also an important thing that we are accepted by and liked by other people. Okay? Many of the vows that we have are related to that, that we need to behave in ways that people will have trust in us, not for our personal, self-esteem, but for Buddhism and for our ability to work to benefit others, teach the Dharma. People need to trust us. So it is a valid concern. On the other hand, if we are too much concerned about this, what people say, what people think, then this can be kind of crippling and not really helpful. Okay, so that's what's being talked about here. And I heard some advice some years ago from one teacher that I found really helpful for myself personally, and I always try to pass it on to other people. He said that if we were ever criticized, people say bad things about us, there's really no reason to be upset about this. What we should do is look objectively at what they are saying and ask ourselves if it's true or not. Because sometimes it is true. People are actually pointing out things that are really there. And if we are spiritual practitioners, which we're trying to be, then it should be a concern that we recognize our faults so that we know what we need to work on. We need to work on those, reducing our faults and increasing our good qualities. And it's sometimes hard to recognize our faults. It's very easy to recognize everybody else's faults. But when it comes to our own faults, we can sometimes be blind. So he said, if somebody's pointing out a fault in you, this is actually a good thing, a positive thing. It gives you a chance to recognize something you need to work on. So from that point of view, there's no reason to be upset. The person is just saying something true, like saying you have a nose in the middle of your face. Okay, so if somebody said that, we wouldn't get upset because it's just true. And it gives us an opportunity to grow. So from that point of view, then it makes sense that we see this person as a spiritual teacher, as it's mentioned in this verse. That person is actually teaching us something important for us. And if we have a hard time accepting that, which we probably do, why is that? It's good to look at why is it so hard to see this person as a teacher. So we might recognize arrogance, pride, looking down at that. But that person's horrible. How could I see them as a teacher? Okay, so, but actually, if we have less pride and more humility, we can see everybody as a teacher, even turkeys, like Venerable was talking about yesterday. We got this teaching from the turkeys. So if we can even learn from turkeys and from other kinds of animals and little children and so forth, then of course we can learn from our peers, people the same age as us. So anyway, that's one part of the advice is, if you look at what the person is saying and you can recognize it is true, then you can accept it as constructive criticism and even be thankful for this. It's painful, but from the point of view of spiritual practice, it's actually helpful. And then he said, but on the other hand, if you really look honestly at what the person is saying and you recognize it's not true, what they're saying isn't true, like if they accuse you of something that you didn't do, you can honestly say, no, it's not true, I didn't do that, I'm not like that. Then again, there's no reason to be upset about that, because what they're saying is like nonsense. It's like saying you have horns on your head. Okay, so if you check, and you don't feel any horns, you look in the mirror and you don't see any horns, then why be upset? Yeah, it's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. There's no basis in reality. So what they're saying, it's just coming from delusion in their mind, delusion, confusion, disturbing emotions. So there's no need to be upset about that. And instead, it's more appropriate to feel compassion for this person, that their mind is so kind of twisted by delusions. So the point is, either way, whether the person is saying something true or they're saying something false, there's no need to be upset about it. That makes sense? Yeah, so I found that advice very, very helpful. And this is something we can use in this kind of situation of being criticized or blamed or people saying bad words about us. And also, praise isn't necessarily a helpful thing. We like to hear it, but is it really that helpful? One thing is, it's not always true. People are sometimes projecting or exaggerating. So again, if we check honestly, we might recognize, well, it's not really that true. On the other hand, it's good to let people say praise. Don't stop them, because that's a good thing for them. It's actually one of the bodhisattva vows, the secondary vows, to give praise, to speak of others' good qualities. So let them say praise, but try not to let it go to your head. And there's a story they tell in the Lam Rim about a Tibetan man. He was probably some kind of official or public figure, and he was very popular. Many, many people liked him, and he was getting a lot of praise and compliments all the time. And before he died, as he was, dying, he said something about how it wasn't really helpful to have all that praise and listen to that praise, because it made him kind of blind to his faults. And he didn't do enough work on, improving himself. Okay, so having too much praise isn't necessarily helpful. And on the other hand, having some criticism, not all the time maybe, but sometimes it's helpful. Especially if it's true. But does this mean that we should never defend ourselves if people are accusing us of things that are not true? No, I think it's fine, to speak out and say, this isn't true, what this person is saying. Although it may not be appropriate at that moment, because if the person who's saying this is just really angry and just venting their anger, they're probably not going to listen to what you say. Okay? And it'll just become a heated argument. So it's better to just let them say what they're saying. But then if other people ask you, people might wonder, well, is this true what the person said? I think it's fine to say, no, it's not true, and tell them, the facts. But when we do this, if we do this, then we need to be careful not to do it with anger towards that person, with a sense of revenge, and I'm right and he's wrong or she's wrong, and wanting to, get back at them and criticize them. But just trying to clear the air. Because again, as monastics and as teachers, if we are teachers, it is important for us to be trusted, to show that we are trustworthy by people. And also we represent the whole of Buddhism. So if a monastic, one person, a monastic or a teacher does something negative, some people, that will totally destroy their faith in Buddhism, and then they won't want to practice anymore. So I think it is important, to clear up false accusations, but do it with kindness and humility rather than pride and anger. Okay, thank you.